Hey everybody, in the previous lesson we wrapped up the shading of our model and today we're going to take care of our lighting. So first let's start by switching the node editor with another 3D viewport, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want on my left side to have only the rendered version and I'll do all of my edits on the right side. Okay, so let's start by deleting our backdrop, which we used only for shading, and I'm going to center the cursor again. Now we need a small plane for our base. I'll just scale that slightly. Good. Now we can create a camera. Remember, with product shots, it's important how the lighting will look from the point of the camera. We're not looking for lighting that will work all around from different angles. We just want to capture that one angle in the best shape possible. So I'll set the view to front and I will create a camera. That way I'm making sure that the camera is looking straight forward. Okay, in here on the left viewport, let's switch to camera view and start placing our camera. One thing that I'm going to do is I'll use a larger focal length, so somewhere around 100 to 110 to 120 millimeters should be good, and let's just move it back until we get our bottle into frame. Of course, feel free to set up the framing of your shot to whatever you like. It really depends on the idea that you have. Right now we're going for a central composition, so I'm guessing keeping things in the middle would be a good idea. Also, there's one thing we can take into account is the spacing from above the bottle and the spacing below. If we have the camera having a lot of space at the top, then the whole composition will look heavy on the bottom and vice versa. So we're looking for a more balanced position for the bottle. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to change is I'll get rid of the built-in lighting, and from the world settings I'll make sure that everything is pure black. Usually in photography, when there is a product shot being created, the lighting and the exposure of the camera is set in such a way that the intensity of the artificial lights, for example strobe lights or different softboxes, are the only ones that affect the photograph, and the photographer is trying to minimize the effect of the lights that are around in the environment. Okay, so let's create our first light, and I'll start with an area light. I'm trying to mimic a softbox. Let's place it on the side. Now, there are a few things that are going to play into how our lighting looks, and the first one is the size of our plain light, so our softbox, and the other one is its position and directionality. So let's go into the settings, and I will switch from a square to a rectangle. At the moment my goal is to have a nice highlight on the edge of the bottle and then have a gradient going across the shape of the bottle. That way we will be able to emphasize on the silhouette while showing the actual shape of the bottle in a nice way. So in order to do that, I will have to do it with more than one light. With one light it will probably be impossible. So let's set up the size. I want a thinner light, so I'll set something like 0.3 meters in the width, and I'll make it 1.2 meters tall. Okay, so this is looking good. Let me just move it to the back so that we get a really nice silhouette being shaped here. Okay, maybe even more. As you can see, rotating it doesn't do much, but we can slightly direct it to our bottle. Now let's add another light, which will be our gradient. We're gonna place this a little bit further, just like that. And as you can see, we're not getting a very smooth gradient. We're getting just a hard light because we are seeing the reflection of our plane light. So in order to smooth the lighting even more, we need to add a second level of diffusion. So let's create a plane, rotate it, and place it directly in front of our lights. Now this is covering all of the lighting, but we're going to fix that with the material. Like I said, in photography, usually this is called a diffuser, and it's generally either a piece of fabric or a piece of cloth. It could be paper too, which basically brings another level of softening the light. So in order to do that, we need to switch from the principled BSDF to a translucent BSDF. And as you can see, we immediately get a really nice soft gradient going across our bottle. Great. Now we can play with the strength of our lights. So I want the gradient to be a little bit stronger. I'm going for a more or less a contrasting image, and I want the roses here on the shape of the bottle to catch some highlights too. Now the light that is shaping the silhouette of the bottle is falling behind a little bit, so we're not getting a nice edge here. So let's increase that too. And what we can do is try moving it further back so that we can get a nice silhouette. We want basically we want the light to be on the very edge of the bottle. Okay, that's looking a lot better now. One thing that I'm noticing is that we can probably get more from the shape of the bottle, because the bottle has a very interesting shape. It has a very interesting transition from a circular shape into a square, and I want to show that in some way. So let's select everything from our geometry and slightly rotate it. I need to select the geometry of the alcohol too. To make things easier, I'll just make sure that the active selection is the bottle, and I will parent everything to it. Great, now if I select only the bottle, I can rotate it slightly, and you can see we're starting to get a little bit of shape coming through in our render. Maybe we can rotate it even more. Now, keep in mind that this will not be the final lighting. We will probably do some tweaking with the lights, and we'll try to make this gradient a lot smoother and a lot more interesting throughout the whole process, but we're gonna leave it like that for now, and we're going to take care of other aspects of our image. For example, we want our base to be a nice reflective surface, and for that I'm going to give it a principled BSDF. We'll make it metallic, make sure that the base color is white, and I'll lower the roughness until we get a nice reflection, just like that. Okay, now we're getting a seamless background, and we're also having the background be completely black. I want to fix that. I actually want to create a nice gradient happening behind the bottle so that we can really shape the silhouette. For that, I'll create a second plane, and I'll place it somewhere in the back of our image. Now, as you can see, there is some light coming through in our composition, which is coming from our diffuser. One way to fix that is to just take our our plane and bring it way back into the distance. Of course, if we're doing this with photography, we're just going to create two setups. We'll have this setup and the one that we're doing now separate, so that we can actually make two different images and compose them. Now, since we're doing things in CG, we don't really need to do that. So let's bring a point light. No, actually, we're looking for a spotlight, and I'll place it so that it casts light onto our plane. That's a little bit too far back. Okay, this is starting to look good, but as you can see, this is a very harsh circle that we're getting from our light. One thing that we need to adjust is the spot size, and the other is the radius. So increasing the radius of our spotlight will make the light softer. Also, we can increase the radius a little bit of the spot size, or the angle in this case. And later we need to make the light stronger. Now, since we have an interesting, basically we're showcasing a product which has a distinctive color, so I'll try to pick a complementary color for the background light. In that case, since we have a orange liquid, in this case the whiskey, we want our background to be in the bluish hue type. We want it in the bluish zone, so there is a nice contrast between the bottle and the background. Okay, another thing that we can do in order to mitigate the light that's bleeding through our image is to just take everything and put it even further away, just like that. And we need to adjust the position of our spotlight too. Also, since we moved things further away, we need to adjust the power too. Great. Now, in order to highlight the bottle more, I want to have some light being reflected on this side, so I want some smooth light being on some smooth light gradient on the left side too, and I want something to be refracted by our liquid. So I'll start with the refracted light. Let's just create another plane, and we're going to position it directly behind the bottle. Let's scale it to size and make sure that it fits right behind our bottle. We're aiming for this to be refracted just by the whiskey. We don't need to have it seen through the glass. Now, since we're going for a nice golden look for our whiskey, let's just give that color to our reflector on the back side. Basically, with liquids, the way you achieve their final look is by giving them something to refract, which looks the way you want it to. For this case, I'll make it metallic, and there are a few things that we can play with. One is the roughness, and the other is the positioning of our plane. As you can see, depending on how we position it, we can control what is seen through our bottle, and of course how strong the refractions are. Great. If we want to further adjust it, we can play with the saturation of the color and basically with the hue and saturation of the color. We should keep the value at 1 at all times. Good, that's looking great, but now I really don't want it seen in the render or the refractions. So let's go into Object and find the Visibility tab. From here, I will disable everything except for transmission. and that way we're getting only the effects that are shown in our bottle instead of seeing it everywhere in the base, background, etc. One thing that I'm going to adjust to is just the height of our refractor so that we don't see it here, or at least that we don't see too much of it here. Okay, the way that I'm going to handle the reflections onto the left side is going to be in a very similar manner. I'll just take a plane, rotate it by 90 degrees, and I'll place it so that it casts some refracted light from our main source onto the bottle. Now, the things that are going to play into account are the position, rotation of that plane, and of course the color. Let's just make sure that it goes out of frame. And one thing that I want is for these reflections to kind of match the color that we're having here. So I will make sure that I'll just copy the color from our refractive material. Great, and now we're getting a nice smooth orangish gradient. One thing that I'm noticing here with this render is that we have a bit of a strong gradient happening here on the right side of the bottle. So let's just take our light and place it slightly further away. This will make the gradient smoother and of course lighter. We can do the same with the other light too, as I don't want this light to be too overwhelming. The last thing that I want is to highlight the actual label. So for that, I will take another spotlight. So let's create that. And I will place it somewhere outside of the shot. After that, we can take our gizmo, which controls the direction of our spotlight, and we can place it directly onto the bottle. Great. Let's just adjust the position slightly and place it again on the label. Now what I'm going to do is just decrease the spot size quite a lot. You will get some light only on the label. And I want that to be in a nice orangish hue. We can also increase the blend, and let's bring the intensity until we see a nice highlight happening here onto the label. One thing that I can also do is just slightly increase the size so that we get a smoother gradient. Okay, the last few things that I want to play with are general composition and the depth of field. For the composition, I actually want the strap to be facing the other direction. And the reason behind that is right now when it's catching too much light on its notch, it's bringing way too much attention to it. So let's just rotate it until we see it twist in the other direction, until we see it show up in the other side of our render. And of course we can play with the positioning as much as we want. What I'm seeing here is the hole in the notch is starting to appear, and I really don't like that because it's creating a point of contrast, and again it's bringing way too much attention to it. So let's play slightly with that position again, or maybe we can rotate it all the way to here. It really depends on personal taste, but what I'm going to do is just slightly bring it so that we can still see the notch, but we can't see the hole in it. Great. Okay, one thing that I want to do is actually I want to lower the saturation of those reflections, because right now they're way too saturated and we're getting some color burn here. So to do that, I'll select the material, copy it, and just bring down the saturation, as it is way too strong right now. We're trying to balance things out between the colors of the bottle and the colors of the background. Great. The last thing that I want to do is the smooth transition between the background and our base plane. So to do that, we're going to play with the depth of field of the camera. I will set the 3D cursor somewhere on the bottle by clicking Shift and left clicking onto the bottle geometry, and then create an empty plane axis. I will select that to be the focus object of our camera, and that way we can control where exactly we want the focus to be just by moving the empty. Okay, now something that is happening is we have a too strong of a transition between the background and our base. So to fix that, let's just take the edge of our background, of our base, just pull it slightly further back so that it falls more into the depth of field. Another thing that I'm going to do is just increase the f-stop to something to like 1.3, and now we're getting a much smoother transition. Let's just crop the render so that it renders only from the camera and we're not seeing anything in excess, and evaluate how our render is going. At the moment, I like it quite a lot. One thing that we can do is just slightly add some color into our softboxes. So I want just a slightly orangish hue coming through the light sources. And great. With that, our camera setup is done and our lighting setup is also ready. And in the next video, we're going to take care of any kind of compositing and post-processing work for our render. And once again, subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.